Hey, what's going on? It's Daniel Gillespie here with UponArriving.com, and in this video I'm going to be talking about everything you need to know about United First Class on domestic flights, and I'm also going to be walking you through the experience so that you can know what to expect on your first United domestic first class flight. So before I jump in, if you're new to this channel, I cover things like credit card rewards, hotels, airfare, and a lot of other interesting travel topics. So if you like that type of stuff, be sure to subscribe and hit that little bell icon so that you don't miss out on anything. So the terminology is a little bit confusing when it comes to United First Class. When I'm referring to United First Class, I'm referring to the premium cabin on any domestic route. So if you were to break down the plane, you would see that there is an economy cabin, which includes the economy plus section, and then there is the cabin at the front, which is the premium cabin, and that is what I'm referring to as first class. Some people might refer to this also as business class or business first, but I'm going with first class because that's actually what the United award chart uses to describe that cabin. Now, it does get a little bit confusing when you're talking about wide-body jets. So for example, let's say you were flying the 787 from the US to Asia. If you were to book a lie-flat seat on that plane, that would actually be considered a business class redemption in a business class cabin. But if that same 787 were flying on a domestic route, let's say from Houston to LA, that would actually be considered a first class cabin because that is the premium cabin on a domestic flight. Now, United also has had 3 cabin aircraft with a true first class, business class, and economy section, but United has been phasing those out for a while. And while I'm not sure exactly when those aircraft are going to go extinct, the odds of you running into one of those on a domestic route are pretty low, so I'm just going to focus more on the 2 cabin aircraft. So to make things easy for this video, just know that when I'm talking about first class, I'm actually referring to the cabin that is at the front of the aircraft on most domestic routes. Now, there are 2 main types of first class on domestic routes. The first is the traditional first class, and this has almost like a large office chair slash movie seat to it. It's about 4 inches wider than an economy seat and has about 7 inches more of legroom. So it's definitely much more comfortable than an economy seat, although it's not exactly like a cutting edge seat. Then there are the wide body jets that have the lie flat seats. So these are those seats that almost look like their own little pods. They allow you to fully recline into a fully lie flat position. They have larger TVs, a better in-flight experience, and the cabin is just going to be much bigger. So most domestic flights with first class are going to have those standard recliner seats. So whether you're flying on a 737 or maybe a smaller regional jet, you're going to probably expect to see those standard recliner seats. But on a lot of routes, you can actually still find those wide body jets. So for example, whenever I'm flying from Houston to New York or Houston to LA, maybe 1 or 2 of those flights out of all of the different flights for a given day might be on a wide body jet. And the easiest way to check this is just to go into Google Flights and look up your flight or look up the route that you're going for and just start clicking through the different flights, and then you'll be able to see exactly which type of aircraft serves that flight, and also it'll even tell you what type of seat to expect, whether it's going to be a lie flat seat or a standard recliner seat. Now, you would think that because a lie flat seat has more room, it's more comfortable to a lot of people, that those would actually be more expensive. But in a lot of cases, when you're talking about the same type of fare bucket, the prices can actually be the same. So that's something that's pretty cool and that I like to look for because I definitely enjoy the lie flat seats a lot more. Now, if you want to book a first class award with miles, it's going to cost you 25,000 United miles or 10,000 additional miles if you're flying on a premium transcontinental flight, which would be a route, say, from New York to LA. Now, in my experience, I've always had trouble finding saver availability for first class for my given routes. You might have better luck on your routes, but I wouldn't necessarily go in expecting to find great saver availability for domestic first class flights. Okay, so now let's get into what you actually can expect to experience whenever you fly United First Class on a domestic flight. So the experience begins whenever you arrive at the airport and you have your own designated check-in area with United Premier Access. Now, typically, this dedicated check-in area has much shorter lines and it's just much less crowded and much less stressful to get through than the standard line that's open for economy passengers. And this section is open to business and first class passengers, but it's also open to those people with elite status or those who even purchase Premier Access. Now, at these check-in desks, you can print out your boarding pass, get your luggage checked, and as a first class passenger, you'll actually have 2 free checked bags, and they can weigh up to 70 pounds each. Now, you can also get access to a priority security line at certain airports. Now, personally, I have TSA pre-check, so I just opt to go in the pre-check line. It's usually shorter, and I just don't want to hassle with having to jump over into the pre-check line, so I always go that route instead. But you can just go in whatever line that you think is best. Sometimes if you go through the priority line, you actually can get kind of TSA Lite, which is kind of like a modified version of TSA PreCheck, so that can be a nice plus for you. So next, you might be wondering about lounge access. Well, if you're flying domestic first class on United, you do not get United Club lounge access. Now, the exception to that is, again, if you're flying on a premium transcontinental route, again, from the East Coast to the West Coast or something like that, then you actually can get United Club access. But for a standard first class flight, you're not going to get access to the United Club. Now, it does sound like a bummer to not get lounge access, but honestly, the United Clubs aren't really that spectacular. Now, I do really like the way that the new United Clubs look. They're just much more modern, and they just look a lot nicer and feel a lot more elegant. But when it comes to the actual food and drink options, there's just really not that much beyond something like cheese cubes, soups and salad, or some other small snacks. So if you want something a little bit more hearty, you definitely want to head over to a different type of lounge, maybe like a Centurion lounge, or sometimes even the Priority Pass lounges can actually fill you up more. So next is the boarding process. Now, as a first class passenger, you will board with Group 1. Now, this does not mean that you'll be the first passenger on the plane, because pre-boarding will board first, and also some other groups like Global Services or United Premier 1K. So you won't be the first to board the plane, but you'll be among the first. Now, whenever we're flying on a smaller aircraft like a 737, we usually arrive to boarding about 5 to 10 minutes prior to boarding, and typically are about the second or third person in the Group 1 line. But when it comes to the larger aircraft, we like to arrive there a little bit earlier, maybe like 20 minutes before boarding, just so we can be near the front. Now, that's just because I like being one of the first people to board a plane. I know a lot of people just could not care less, and in fact probably want to avoid being on the plane as much as possible. So this definitely just comes down to personal preference. But if you're like me and you like to be among the first to board, you definitely want to plan it out so that you're in that line prior to the actual time of boarding. So the actual first class cabin is going to differ a little bit depending on the type of aircraft that you're flying on. Typically, you'll see about 3 to 5 rows of first class seats, and they'll usually be arranged in a 2-2 configuration, unless you're on a smaller regional aircraft, in which case you may see a 1-2 configuration. In this cabin, you'll have your own lavatory, but sometimes the economy passengers do find their way in there. I think whenever the curtain is closed, it's really only available to them if there's some type of like emergency or some type of need like that. But for the most part, you should have your own lavatory, and you're not really supposed to go up to the lavatory and wait up there while someone else is in there, but a lot of times the flight attendants are actually cool with it and allow you to go up there anyways. Once you find your seat, you should eventually be asked for your drink order. Sometimes the flight attendants are kind of slacking on this and can take a while to get to you. Other times they may take your drink order pretty much right after you sit down, and eventually they should bring you a hot towel to help you freshen up. Now, the standard recliner seat, in my opinion, is pretty comfortable. It's definitely much more wide than an economy seat is, and you can definitely feel the added space, but it's not some sort of like revolutionary seat where it's like blowing away the competition. Now, next to your seat, you'll have a little mini tray that you can pull out, and it's a great place to kind of put your drinking glasses. And then you'll have a full tray table that pulls out of your armrest and is pretty wide and can hold your tray or a laptop or whatever else you need at the moment. On aircraft like the 737, sometimes you may have a screen built into the seat in front of you, and usually it'll have DirecTV access, which is actually free. You can watch different channels and movies. It will have a little slot for you to slide a credit card, but just note that everything is actually free on there. And other times there won't be any screen at all, so it just sort of depends on the aircraft that you get on. The seat can be easily reclined with a little silver button that you hit, and it does have a pretty decent recline angle. So overall, the standard recliner seats are definitely much more comfortable than economy seats, but it's really nothing too extravagant that I would necessarily get too excited about. Now, if you're flying on a wide body plane, that first class seat is going to be a lot different. You're going to have a fully lie flat seat in a lot of cases, and so you're going to be able to get much more comfortable. You're going to have a much larger TV screen, better in-flight entertainment options. They should have you headphones for you, so it's just a lot easier to get more comfortable, in my opinion. Now, the layout on these wide body jets, whether you're talking about a 787 or a 777 or whatever else, can be a lot different. So sometimes you may see a 2-2-2 configuration, a 2-1-2 configuration, or even the dreaded 2-4-2 configuration, which I think is definitely one of the worst business class experiences if you get caught in the middle. And something else I forgot to point out is that all of these seats will have outlets for you to keep your devices powered, and I know that the lie flat seats also have USB ports as well. So it's really easy to kind of keep your devices powered and to get work done whenever you're flying in the first class cabin. Now, as you probably are aware, as a first class passenger, you'll get complimentary alcohol served to you. Now, personally, I don't drink, so I usually just order sparkling water, but I know that Brad's had a lot of different drinks on there like Bloody Marys, mimosas, and all sorts of other things. So you should expect to be able to order pretty much any kind of standard drink, but don't really get your hopes up too much for anything premium because it's probably not going to be there. Now, when it comes to the dining options, typically you should be given two different options. I feel like a lot of times one option is slightly more healthy, so it may be something like a salad or a salmon dish. And I know that a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about the dining on United and some other legacy carriers like American, but I have to say that I've actually enjoyed some pretty decent meals flying first class on United. I know that a couple of years ago, I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I tested the waters and actually tried out an enchilada on United dining, and I was a little bit scared to actually bite into it, but it ended up being like a really good enchilada. And I'm from Houston. I know all about Tex-Mex and I know what makes a good enchilada. And I have to say that this actually was like a pretty decent enchilada, which surprised me. So sometimes, you know, the United dining experience is not that bad. I think the worst part of it though is probably the presentation. A lot of times the food just looks horrible, like you don't even want to touch it. So you kind of have to have this like leap of faith mentality and just bite into it and just hope for the best. But sometimes that will surprise you and the taste will be good, and other times it actually won't be good. So it is very hit or miss with United, but I just wouldn't go in thinking that it's always going to be nasty. Sometimes it can be quite good. With that said, I don't think I would ever really look forward to eating on a United plane. Definitely not like on some other foreign airlines like Singapore or Cathay Pacific or something like that, but just know that it may not be quite as bad as you think it might be. And also, United has some fantastic desserts. I've had some really good like chocolate pie and chocolate chip cookies and things like that. So I know some people will just order dessert on a shorter flight, so it really is nice that you can get at least a decent dessert. Also, United will serve you a meal even on shorter flights. So we just had basically a 2-hour flight down to Mexico and still served meals on both flights there and back. So even on the shorter flights, you still can get a full meal. So the service on a United first class flight is kind of just mediocre in my opinion. I've had some flight attendants that were great, some that were not so great, borderline just kind of rude. But overall, I just wouldn't expect anything super special like you might on a different airline. It's probably going to be pretty standard, maybe slightly upgraded from the economy experience, but nothing to truly rave about. And one last thing I forgot to mention is that whenever you check your bags in, you'll actually get a priority tag for your luggage. So your luggage should be among the first bags that come out whenever you go to baggage claim. Now in practice, this doesn't always play out, but I will say on the last probably 2 or 3 or 4 flights that we've had as a United first class passenger, our bags have been like the first out of the 5 or 6 bags that have come out. So it has worked out for us, but I know that other times in the past, that priority tag pretty much was useless and didn't mean anything. So it is kind of hit or miss when it comes to that priority luggage treatment. So that's it for my United first class experience. Let me know in the comments below if I left out anything that you thought was significant. If you've ever flown United first class on a domestic route, what did you think about it? Did you think that it was good or bad? Just let me know in the comments below how your experience went. And if you found this video helpful or informative, be sure to subscribe and hit that like button, and then check out the link below if you want to sign up for my newsletter for constant updates on all things credit card rewards.